Welcome everybody to my talk about game as an art form. First of all, not a lot of stuff is going to happen there. I'm a talker, so I talk a lot, and I made some slides just to kind of complement my talk, but don't count too much on that thing over there. So I'm pretty excited to be here. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. So first of all, there's going to be a bit of a discussion in the end, but hopefully I'll get to that. But also feel free to raise your hand and ask me anything you want about anything I'm saying. I might say something like, okay, hold that thought, we'll get back to that. But really feel free. I'd love to hear what you think about different things that I'm saying. So I'm going to start with just a small introduction about my story. I don't really like talking about myself. Well, who am I kidding? I love talking about myself. But this actually pertains to what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to just kind of run through it. My name is Inon. It's pronounced Inon, like what's going on. And I'm originally from Israel. I lived in many places. I know I have a bit of an accent. If you don't understand anything I'm saying, ask me. That's cool. I'm a game developer, game designer. I make music for games. I make music, and I make games. The thing is, at some point I realized that music today is not really what it used to be, in the sense that when I was a little kid, I used to just like put on an album and listen to it like the whole thing, and then maybe put it again and listen to the whole thing. No one does that anymore. I mean, I'm posting tracks that I'm working really hard on Facebook, and like no one listens to that. You know, people are at work. No one wants to listen to a whole music track. So my mother likes it, and then she like posts a comment like, "Oh, you're so talented," which super embarrasses me. And that's about that, you know. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, how can I touch people with my music if no one's listening to it? You know, even if it was beautiful, like no one would ever know. And I realized that the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to be a part of something. To have it, the music needs to complement like a different, bigger thing. And to me, that thing was games. I'm really into games. I was always into games, and especially game music. I always thought that that's the best way to kind of touch people when they're playing a game and they're not really paying attention to the music, but it's a part of the world that they're in at that moment. That was really exciting to me. What is art? Right. So this talk is about game as an art form, and this is probably the most controversial part of this talk, because I work a lot with musicians, with artists. Actually, no one really agrees on that. It's amazing. Like, you can have like 4 different musicians in a room, and you ask them like, what is art? Like, why do we do that? What's the purpose of that? And you will have like 10 different opinions. And if you ask them the next day, you'll have different opinions. And they always argue about that. And no one actually knows no one agrees on what is art. Everyone has his own opinion. I'll try to give you my own opinion about this, and it's okay if you don't agree about that. And I would love to hear your opinion in the end. But I'll kind of analyze everything in this talk according to my opinion about art and what art does. So, in my opinion, the art is the medium in which you transform, in which you convey emotions. So if an artist has a certain emotion and he wants other people to feel that as well, he uses his art or music or painting or whatever, dance, in order to convey these emotions to the recipient, to the listener. And everything that has something to do with art has something to do with emotions. So you can have a documentary film which is very factual, but when you say, oh, this is a bit like artistic, what you really mean is that, okay, this part has like a bit of emotion to it. The storytelling, the music, everything is used to convey these emotions. So art is just, in my opinion, the medium. It's kind of like the cable in which you transmit those emotions. That's interesting in 2 ways, and really bear with me because we're going to get into the whole game thing, but this is like kind of important to understand what we're talking about. So the interesting thing occurs in 2 different times. One of them is when the artist transmits the art, when the emotion kind of leaves the artist. I want an outlet to my emotions. I'm using my art to express those. The second one is when the art hits the recipient and he hopefully gets the emotion that I was trying to transmit. So the art in itself is just the medium, and there are two different kind of encounters between the art and the artist, and the art and the recipient. The purpose of the artist is to be as coherent as possible with his emotions. So if I know I have, okay, it's easy to say, I want to make a sad song. I'm going to make it in like whatever, a minor scale, and I'm going to use these chord progressions. Right, that's kind of easy. But what if I want to make like a song that is like, that expresses the fact that I'm kind of exhausted after looking for something for a very long time, and I'm kind of sad, but then I have like a ray of hope, you know? That's very specific. It takes like a good artist to transmit that into his art and eventually into a lot of people. So if a lot of people hear my music and they all feel the same way about it, they all get the emotion that I intended, that, in my opinion, makes me a good artist. All right, but what's the purpose of the recipient? What do they use music for or art for? I think in a way they want to receive a certain emotion. If I'm listening to Bob Marley, maybe I want to imagine myself like, I don't know, drinking rum, whatever, on the beach, or whatever makes me feel good. But that's what I'm using this music for, to create this certain vibe or a certain emotion that I want to evoke. So, what does it have to do with games? I mean, we've been making games for a long time. I guess all of you guys have been making games for quite some time. But why are we doing this? I mean, that's something that I'm asking musicians, I'm asking artists, and no one really knows how to answer it. Like, what's the purpose of all this? So, this is, well, kind of a long quote, but this guy, Roger Ebert, he's a film critic, and he's kind of condescending about this whole thing. He says that no one has ever been able to cite a game worthy of comparison with great dramatists, poets, filmmakers, novelists, and composers. He doesn't think that games are considered to be art. But why is that? When you look at the last sentence, it says, for most gamers, video games represent a loss of those precious hours we have available to make ourselves more cultured, civilized, and empathetic. I think this is the key to how he views that. I mean, cultured, civilized, that's how he sees art. And a lot of people use art as kind of a higher form, or kind of a status symbol of like the higher society. In my opinion, that has nothing to do with art. That's something we ascribe to art as time progressed, but art doesn't necessarily need to be that. Although the last word, empathetic, is really important for that, because we do want to be empathetic. We do want to understand the emotion that was conveyed to us. So when we look at artistic games such as Faz, whoa, that's super spastic. Okay, let's go on. Or beautiful games such as Monument Valley, it's kind of clear that the artistic side there is very present. They wanted to make the game beautiful. They wanted to make the music beautiful. They wanted to have it, well, okay, enough. They wanted to make it an experience that everyone will perceive in a way. And the gameplay is not really, in my opinion, the main thing there. I mean, it's not a super exciting game, but it's something you experience as a work of art, and you get the emotion that was intended. But is it art? Well, I think classically, when you look at games like, I mean, one of the first video games, you know, you see Pong. Pong, in my opinion, is not really, the purpose of which wasn't artistic. It was supposed to be fun. Fun is like more an experience than an emotion. You want to have fun when you're playing that game. But how is any of the elements in the game, the graphics, the sound, none of which actually serve a purpose to the overall experience? When you're playing Monument Valley, it's very different from playing Zelda. It's very different from playing Mario. You're getting into a world and you're fully immersed in this world. You understand, like, when I think back of like playing Zelda, I was in this game. I wasn't playing the game. I was Link, you know, I was the guy with the sword, and I was coming back from school every day, and I was really that guy. And I remember that as an amazing experience full of emotions, which is very specific to Zelda. It has nothing to do with any of the other games. But when you're playing Pong, you're just having fun, right? It's like playing tennis, it's like playing basketball. So when I think about it, the art here is not really a big thing in this specific game. Does it need to be beautiful? I mean, some of the games are just, they serve a certain purpose, and that purpose is, again, just having fun. Fun, I don't know if it's an emotion, but it produces value. So if, in my opinion, when you do something that produces value, if someone wasn't having fun 5 minutes ago and now is having fun, you produced value to that person. That makes it kind of a product, right? So if it's a product, can it be art? I think that's a very interesting question. And which emotion are we trying to convey by making someone have fun? How precise is the conveyed emotion? And how do we know if it's good enough? I think when we saw this quote before, this guy was really saying, I don't know if it's art or not, but it's not good art. But how can we measure it? In my opinion, again, the way you measure art is how precise is the emotion that you convey. If most people saw this and they felt the same thing, then yeah, you made your like, that's a good job as an artist. We can talk about board games and sports and how they serve this purpose. It's in my opinion, they're not very artistic. They could use artistic elements, but that's not the real point behind them. So I think that the cool thing about games is that you can actually combine almost every art form. I mean, you can make a game that is, I don't know, takes place in a museum, and you can bring a painter to paint real paintings and put them in the virtual museum, and you can bring an architect and he'll design the museum and you put it in Unity, and you can bring like, I don't know, a musician and a sound designer. All those people can cooperate and make an amazing artistic piece that doesn't necessarily need to be fun. It could be fun, just like a movie can be fun, just like music can be fun. But the fun is not necessarily the end goal here. Okay, I've been talking like quite a lot, but why? I mean, so maybe it's art, maybe it's not art, like who cares, you know? And like, what am I trying to do here? And what's the best way to do it? If I'm trying to just make people have fun, yeah, I can think of the most fun game for me to play and just do that. But what if I'm trying to do something different? What if I'm trying to make people, for example, I saw a game about dealing with cancer, or I worked on a horror game with someone that was like really scary and kind of disturbing. That's the emotion that we wanted people to feel. So we had a VR equipment to make you feel like you're lost in the woods, and that was super scary. And I couldn't even play the game, and I worked on it, you know? So when you're doing something like that, you should define to yourself, okay, I'm trying to convey these emotions, and these need to be expressed in every aspect of the game. If we're talking about music, if we're talking about sound, if we're talking about graphic design, if we're talking about story, gameplay, architecture, dance, video, whatever it is that we combine there, we want to create like an immersive experience. We want to create a bubble that when someone starts playing that, he forgets about the outside world and is only immersed in the game that we created. We need to stay coherent, and we need to combine like all the different elements. I want to talk about a small thing I call bursting the bubble. So the thing is, if you have a game and all the elements in the game kind of fit perfectly together, but then you can have like one sound effect that is not really, it doesn't speak in the language of the game. It can be like 8-bit in a very like hi-fi game, or like whatever. One sound that is not exactly right can completely burst the bubble. You don't want the person to think, oh, okay, I'm playing a game right now. You want them to think like, whoa, I'm that person. I'm in this world, you know? And in my opinion, the right way to do it is growing the game together with all artists. So a lot of people create the game first, and then they try to speak to the musician or graphic designer and say, oh, I want to make it like this or like that. I think that in the early stages of the game, you should sit together with those people and kind of have a talk with them and say like, How do you want to do that? How do you see that? Sometimes you'll need to kind of give up parts of your vision, and even though you saw that in a certain way, maybe the musician will say, oh, but I see it differently. And you might want to say to them, okay, but I see it like that, and it's my game, so do whatever I'm saying. Or maybe you will say, okay, that's a piece that we're all creating together, and discuss it together with all those people. So that's what I see as organic game development, contrary to patchwork. When you kind of make those elements afterwards, it doesn't always fit perfectly. But if you do want to do that, you need to really know how to communicate this to the artists. And that means not argue with them, but just say, hey, this is my vision, man. Like, I wanna make this. I want to make this like this movie, or here are the references I have for my music. Like, can you make it kind of like that? Like, it doesn't need to be exactly like that, but whatever. That's a lot of times it's a source of like arguing, but it shouldn't be. It's a very interesting process to work with other people like that. I want to show you a small thing. It's like, okay, so I'm maybe I forgot to say that I'm called Mojo Kid. So when I make music for games, I give people this little brief that is, it's kind of like trying to understand what people expect from their game. And I see myself sometimes, my work is a lot of time translation work. I want to understand what the other person sees as his vision for the game. It's not always something that's really easy to understand, because some people will say like, oh, I want it like, I don't know, dreamy. What is dreamy then? Like, how do I make dreamy music? But that's my job as a musician for games, to understand when someone says dreamy, oh, I'll use like an augmented chord here, I'll use this sound, I'll use that. So I created this little brief that I give people, and it's just like trying to put it in their terms, and then I have to decipher it and understand what that means when I make the music or sounds for the game. It's on one hand you have like atmospheric music that is kind of like very loose, and it could be also melodic, that is very like kind of a melody, just a straightforward theme. When you talk about atmosphere, is it dark? Is it bright? Density, like how dense is the music? Some people want, like, you know, the old 8-bit games like Contra or like Double Dragon had like really dense music. Or sometimes you have stuff like Monument Valley, which had a really dreamy, roomy music. Quality, is it 8-bit? Is it hi-fi? What instruments do you use, digital or acoustic? And what's the mood, sad or happy? And the speed. These are just like very abstract, very kind of loose concepts. But when you talk to people, you try to realize what they mean by that. Like, and also it's always good to ask them for references. So that's what I do when I make music for games. What's going on here? All right. I want to show you also a small thing I made with Unity. I hope the sound. Woo! Yeah, we got some sound here. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm trying to show you here, but it's like it's kind of an art piece, and I'll explain to you very briefly what I did here. I made so imagine like a room that has like transparent walls, and there's a ball, like a sphere, in the middle of the room, and all these rooms they exert forces on the ball. So the ball is like kind of like floating in the middle, and you can create more balls, and every ball repels the other ball, so they all like repel each other. It creates like an interesting movement. But when you add more elements to it, the intensity of the music also increases, and the balls react to the intensity of the music. And then you have like cubes that are attracted to the ball but repel other cubes. I know it sounds kind of weird. It is kind of weird, but I'll show it to you anyway. Let's start with a low volume, because I'm not really sure if it's gonna blast. All right. And where is the gain here? Okay, let's try that one again. Mm-hmm. Come on, Mac. All right, we have the game. Okay, so the walls are invisible. You can't see them. We have one ball in the middle. Now I'm adding a cube, and then you see how those how they react to the music and how they react to each other. I'll add some more elements. Alright, when I add more elements, the intensity of the music increases. I can also destroy some of the balls or a cube, and then the intensity will decrease. Let's go crazy. So yeah, it gets a little bit slow. If you guys saw the previous talk about optimization, that's something I should really take into account. But as you can see, I need to stop this one. Yeah, it gets too distracting. What's the point of all this? I'm not really sure. It actually shows kind of the opposite of what I meant to be saying. I meant to say that we need to think about what we're trying to express the whole time. I kind of wanted to show you a counterexample. You don't always need to think about that. Sometimes things just happen. Sometimes you think about it, retroactively. You think, okay, maybe I should take this and use it to express this and this and that. But the point is this is not a final product, but when it does become, or if it becomes a final product, I need to know what I was trying to show people, what I wanted people to feel, and I need to kind of take this into account and make this a part of my creation. Yeah, I want to open this to discussion and see if you guys have any thoughts about this, about arts, about games. Go for it. Yeah.
Well, I do kind of take issue with this thing that Pong is an art, or that it couldn't be art. Because even though it doesn't look like anything, as a creator, could have the intention of portraying a back and forth between two people, like an argument or something. That argument becomes more intense, and eventually it ends with one of them losing.
I totally agree. No, I think it's a very valid point, and I think it's also important to know that this is kind of it's not a binary yes or no answer. This is kind of a continuum, it's a spectrum, and some things that are very obviously artistic games, and other things are they use artistic elements. I think you're right in a way. This could be the art could be a part of it, but they didn't really have much to play with in order to express that. I mean, all they had was some pixels, like 100 pixels altogether or something, and they had to play with that. But it's true, yeah. It does express some artistic ideas or some emotions.
I mean, you can express your intent and you can express meaning on a lot of levels.
Right.
That are not purely visual.
Definitely.
But
Definitely.
they didn't express any of those intentions.
Oh, no, it but it could have.
But isn't art as well experimenting? Because they were creating something new. They were trying stuff out. They didn't know what they were making since it was the first game. They were trying to find a new use for this device that was intentionally used for math or code or whatever. They were trying to find a new use for it. And isn't that sort of artistic in itself? Trying to find new uses for things?
I agree. I think the way I see it is that if we get back to my initial definition of art is conveying emotion, and as I said, it's a twofold thing. It's the artist expressing his emotions, but also the recipient receiving the emotions. So when you look at the purpose of Pong, I don't know if the artist was trying to convey these emotions, but maybe it doesn't matter. Because I can listen to a bird, sing and say like, okay, that sounded like music to me. Maybe the bird wasn't thinking about that, but maybe I was imagining the bird as a musician, and I was imagining this as an intention of conveying a certain emotion. This can go the other way around as well. An artist can also create something and imagine a hypothetical recipient to that and say, okay, if I was listening to that, I would feel this and this and that. Maybe no one will ever listen to that, but it still doesn't change the fact that for him it was art because he had an outlet to his emotions. So in a way, yeah, it all depends on how you analyze it, you know.
Also, you said something of board games as well.
Board games,
yeah. Not being art, well, not in the same sense. And I think actually Brenda Romero made a board game called Train.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really cool board game that does have like a deeper meaning.
They could be artistic. I mean, when you play Monopoly and you play like I don't know, Risk, you feel completely different things, right? They both can be equally fun, but they have a different vibe to them. So yeah, they do use artistic means to provoke a certain thing, but
the game Train, I don't know if you've heard of it,
mm-hmm.
but it was just like a board game where you had to place trains to try to get places. But then after playing it, the player found out that you were transporting, what was it?
Use.
Yeah, during the World War II. So then they were like, oh shit, I got so many trains. and that's sort of, they were trying to express something. So that's sort of an exception, I think, because it's so different.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I made a game in the Global Game Jam that's exactly like that. It's a 2-minute long game. Do you mind if I show it on your computer?
No, go for it.
Okay. I know that you do another discussion.
You want, in the meantime, does anybody else want to say something? Yeah?
With more and more like artists, taking it from the other direction, going art towards games instead of games towards art, more and more like fine artists are starting to use more audio-visual elements in their work. Especially with interaction with participants and things. When does that start to become a game? When do we draw the line when we go, that piece of art is actually a game? Is it a competition element? Is it trying to get feedback? What defines the two things?
So again, I'll have to kind of like say what I feel about it, but take it with a grain of salt. That's just how I see things. In my opinion, when it becomes game, when it starts being kind of like interactive and fun. Like it needs to be fun in a certain way. It doesn't mean that it's like woo fun. It can be like a horror film can be fun as well. Oh, it's Unity.
Yeah,
Tribe Safari. Yeah. But essentially, it's not very clear always when something is a game or not. Going back to what you guys said about board games, I think it's important to consider. What is it about sports? For example, if you're playing football, is that art? Like for example, if we imagine the guy who created the rules of football, and for example, he knew that I don't know if it actually worked like that, probably not. But let's say he said, okay, it would be cool if there would be like a thing such as offside. That like someone like scores a goal and everyone's happy, but then they realize it was offside and it's not really a goal. So maybe if he intended us to experience this emotion, maybe that's also artistic in a way, But maybe it just happened organically, which doesn't really change anything because you can always imagine the artist. You can always imagine an artist that doesn't even exist. I can listen to a train and say, oh, that sounds like a musical piece, written for a snare or something. Everything good?
I'm waiting for it. I like with the web player and without the web player.
Okay. You guys have more thoughts or ideas about this, or like personal experiences about your own games? That's like, I think, super interesting. Okay.
Do you want to play, or let's find like a volunteer to play this game?
Yeah, sure. Anybody wants to play a game? Well, that's very sad. You're in the game conference, guys. You should be like raising your hand.
So I did this in the Global Game Jam 2 years ago. Right.
You want to explain anything?
No,
about
I don't
this?
explain anything. You just play.
Get them. Oligoner är fienden.
Have you tried Dragon again? Just the train. Who made the music for this?
Omri Lab.
Good stuff.
One more, or two more. I don't know.
So that's the train. That's the
Yeah.
train segue. Oh my god. Brilliant, man. So actually, thanks a lot, man. I think it's a really, really good example of something that is not necessarily fun. No offense, but but it actually conveys a certain emotion very efficiently. I mean, I think we all felt it when it became like really clear towards the end. You guys have any thoughts or yeah?
So does having a game is artistic as soon as it provokes a thought?
In my opinion, anything is artistic when there's an emotion involved. So again, that's just my personal opinion. I'm very open to hear different opinions about that, but that's as close as I could ever get to defining art. In my opinion, it's just conveying an emotion. Yeah?
When you make games, and when you make games as like a job, like to put bread on your table, you're making a product. You put a lot of artistic emotion into it. It's also a product.
I agree.
And that's the wedge I think that I think that people who just want art to be art, that they have a problem with.
But does that contradict necessarily? I mean, if you watch a movie which is a product, and that movie made you cry, and let's say that the director of the movie wanted you to cry at that certain point in the movie, and he used certain artistic elements like the music, the art, the whatever to make you cry, is it not a product anymore? I understand that there is kind of always a struggle between making it a pure product and making it a pure art, but it's a spectrum, you know?
Yeah, true.
Art is arguably a consumerist thing these days anyway.
Sorry?
Art is arguably a consumerist thing these days anyway.
Yeah, it could be, and it's a fact that people sell art pieces, and of course a lot of musicians want to make money with their music, and that's fair enough. I mean, we all need to. At the end of the day, we all need to make a living. Like, I don't expect artists to be such an idealist that they're like, oh, I don't want any money. I just want to express myself. No, but that doesn't contradict. All I'm saying is, and I think. If you sum it up, in my opinion, is you need to be aware of that. You need to know where you are on this continuum and how artistic you want it to be. And if artistic, then what kind of emotions do I want to convey? And what kind of things in the game am I going to use to convey these emotions? Yeah? All right.